Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Wednesday round session. I'm very thrilled for all of you to be here, both in person and online. I'm not going to tell you all the exciting details of our speaker coming up. Dr. Whittink is going to do that, but I will do the housekeeping because I know it's everybody's favorite. So just a couple of reminders, particularly for those of you who have been asking questions about the evaluation. A couple of key components related to your participation. Number one is we welcome your comments and questions. We will have a moderated Q&A session at the end, and I will be fielding questions both from within the room, plus or minus some peanut gallery commentary, as well as navigating comments that come in online. For those of you who are online, please do use the Q&A function at any time during the talk. If you're here in person, we'd love to field your questions at the end. And then the second is that we will be sending out an evaluation, both available by QR code at the conclusion of the session for those of you here in the room. For those of you who are on Zoom, you should be able to get it in at least two ways. One, it will probably appear in the chat about 48 to 52 minutes. I don't know what CPT code that is, right as we're ending the session. But then also, if you've registered online, you'll receive it via email. And thank you in advance for completing that, not only for specific feedback related to the session and our speaker, but also for you to receive your continuing education credit. That concludes my very important announcements. Please keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle. I will hand it over to Dr. Whittink to introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosenberg. And I'm glad you did that part because I would not have gotten that as smoothly. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. John Dorsey. I have a sort of a special place in my heart because John and I started at the same time in medical school at Jefferson in Philadelphia. And so it's fun to see John after all these years and hear what he's been up to. He is the founder and executive director of Project Horseshoe Farm that you're going to hear about today, which provides volunteer-driven, community-focused programs to improve the health and quality of life of vulnerable populations, including the types of patients that many of us care for here in the department. He earned his BA in neurosciences from Pomona College and his MD from Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, and he completed his psychiatry residency at UC Davis, where he received also the Outstanding Resident Award and Resident Medical Staff Outstanding Teaching Award. So I think hopefully we're in for a good talk based on that information and knowing John. Before he moved to Greensboro in Alabama, Dr. Dorsey was on the faculty at Loma Linda University Medical University, and he co-directed the Assertive Community Treatment Act teams there for patients with severe mental illness. He also served as a staff psychiatrist at Village Integrated Services Agency in Los Angeles County. And currently he provides psychiatric care, serves on the board at the Hale County Hospital, is a staff psychiatrist at Colonial Haven Nursing Home, and an adjunct clinical faculty at the University of Alabama School of Medicine. And he's most recently been recognized as a pillar of West Alabama by the Community Foundation. And we're super excited to hear more about this innovative program, and I hope you enjoy.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, really wonderful to be here. And yeah, just so impressed. I got to see a little bit of Marcia's work in the MIPS program. And I think it really is interesting to see sort of all these efforts sort of converging on some of the same ideas. Also really nice to be back here at University of Rochester. My brother, Ray Dorsey, and his wife, Zena, were lit up when they heard that I was coming back to Rochester, and both were telling me, and Dr. Lee, and telling me all the people I needed to meet when I was here. Just really fond memories of being here and being connected with the psychiatry department and the neurology department. Also really neat to be at the birthplace of the biopsychosocial model. So I think really appropriate, hopefully, that this talk is occurring here. But I wanted to start out and just kind of make this more of a discussion format just to kind of frame things a little bit and throw this out and ask, we use this term community health a lot. And I wanted to ask, what do you guys think? What is community health? Anybody have any thoughts or ideas? You guys are going to be put on the spot. What do you guys think? What is it? If you were thinking about community health, you throw the term around. What is it? Yeah. Any other ideas? Yeah. So kind of decreasing barriers or stigma or other things like that. Yeah. 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 So real collaboration and sort of partnership at the same level. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Very broad term.
Big term. Yeah. 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 And maybe just one other question I was going to ask is like, and this maybe for the students, what could each of us do as an individual to contribute to community health or strengthen our local community's health? If you were in a neighborhood or in a community, can you think of things that you might do individually rather than abstract? What might you actually do to contribute or strengthen a local community's health? Oh, I apologize. Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So maybe outside of your sort of professional work, being present in the community or sort of being present in sort of community functions. Yeah. Anybody else? I think we're in a world where people feel like they don't have agency, and I think it is worth reflecting on what it is that we can do. Any other thoughts? Yeah. So part so participating in local government through advocacy or other means, running for office or other ways of sort of participating in local government. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, so really get involved in learning about the history of the community and what the culture and sort of the values are in the local community. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah. So getting involved through volunteering and community-based organizations. Interesting. Love all of those things. I think it really is a really broad term. And what I wanted to describe is maybe our efforts in Greensboro, Alabama, and a part of rural West Central Alabama, and maybe then open it up at the end and kind of compare sort of ideas and open it up for discussion. How's that sound to you guys? Good. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. And it's so as a spoiler alert, this is not Greensboro, Alabama. This is, for those of you who are thinking about moving to Greensboro, this is Laguna Beach, California. I finished my residency in psychiatry at UC Davis, and I grew up nearby in Newport Beach and moved down to Southern California. And like Marcia was saying, I got a great job. I was working at Loma Linda, sort of helping to direct a sort of community treatment team, and also working. The Village is kind of a clubhouse model for most of you guys who are familiar with that sort of model for taking care of people with severe mental illness. Really loved my work and was living in a place that's really beautiful. But I kind of was looking at my life and seeing where the next 30 years was going. And you kind of get this internal sense that you're maybe on the right path or the wrong path. And I kind of sensed, I was like, all right, I see where this is going, and this is not really the right path for me. I was mentioning to Marcia, my dad's from a small town in West Virginia. My family comes from sort of rural West Virginia. And my dad always mentioned, like when I went into medicine, that he saw me being a small town family medicine doctor. I think the thing that drew me to healthcare was really the relationships and the community aspect. I just like people and like the sort of personal nature of things rather than the industrial scale of things. So I'd always been thinking about that. And I ended up at a conference down in San Diego and met another psychiatrist, and we became kind of quick friends. And he was from Jackson, Alabama. And I started talking with him about maybe moving to a rural community and saying, am I off in this? And he's like, well, John, if you want to be in a rural community, Alabama invented rural communities. You need to come down and check it out. We got lots of rural communities. So I ended up setting up some interviews in Louisiana and Alabama and Georgia, actually. and ended up getting a job at Rice Hospital. So big quintessential state psychiatric hospital, and was kind of had a sensible plan. I was going to work half time at the state psychiatric hospital, get my feet grounded, kind of get to know the state a little bit, maybe find a town where they needed a psychiatrist and kind of take it in a sort of sensible way. So I packed up my car, gave all my stuff away. I started driving cross country. My family's like, "Where are you going? You don't know anybody in Alabama." And I said, "Well, I'm going." And so they said, "You're going to be back in a year." And I was like, no, I'm going to go see how it goes. So I packed up, started driving cross country, got to Oklahoma, got a phone call from the administrator at Bryce and said, "We no longer need your services." And I'm like, "Ooh." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, we found somebody who wants to work full time." And I'm like, "Oh man." And I was like, I couldn't swallow my pride and drive back to California at that point and admit that I had made a mistake. So I decided to go down to my brother's house in Houston to kind of gather myself. And he's like, "Well, John, you need to stay here for a little while." And I said, "Well, why?" He goes, "Well, this hurricane coming through." And I go, "Hurricane Schmurricane, how big can it be?" But it happened to be 2005, and it was Hurricane Katrina was right in my path. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's completely tuned out of the world. So I've lost my job. I've got a natural disaster telling me to go back. And I'm like, well, what do? I can't give up so quickly. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to go to Alabama and make an adventure and see what happens. And so I drove to Alabama. They raised the rate of the hotel that I was staying at to $185 a night. I didn't have any income, didn't have a job, didn't have a place to stay. And I'm like, what do I do? And everybody was up from New Orleans, had taken all the rentals. And so I'm like, how do I make this work? I got to figure out, first of all, if I don't find some place to stay, I'm going to spend through all my savings in a month. So I ended up at a local mobile home sales office and walked in. And I said, "Will you rent me a mobile home?" And they looked at me and they looked at my California driver's license and my California license plate. Like, this guy's going to start a meth lab. I was like, oh, no. And literally took me to a back room and started grilling me about questions like, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I'm a psychiatrist." And they're like, "That makes no sense at all. It makes less sense than the meth lab theory." They're like, "This is not adding up." And after about an hour of sort of grilling me, I'm sweating and they're like, "All right, I just need a place to live." And they go, "All right, you need to go down to Greensboro." And I go, "Where's Greensboro?" They go, "Just go down to Greensboro." So I go down to Greensboro and go to the catfish capital of Alabama. And they gave me a number for a local pastor and a woman who was running a nonprofit. And I was just kind of blown away by this town. It's sort of this quintessential small Southern town. Kind of the antebellum architecture, Main Street, really cool buildings. They had this architecture program out of Auburn University that had young people who were really doing really interesting design and build projects. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And I went over to the hospital and they were like, "We don't have a psychiatrist and really would love to have mental health here." And so I said, and they could help me to find housing. So I said, all right, I guess this is where I'm going to get started. So I just kind of settled in there. What was interesting is in that history, in that area, it really has a lot of challenges, but also a lot of beautiful features. But a lot of people have come into the towns in that area and really tried to fix things. And said, all right, we've got the solution. I think several of you guys mentioned sort of the collaborative approach rather than having this external idea of how to make things better or how to fix things. And I've seen that pattern over and over, and it always fails. What was kind of nice, they had just opened up a geriatric psychiatry unit at one of the local hospitals. So I was able to just get a job and just kind of settle in and get to know the community a little bit. And medicine and psychiatry is a wonderful way. You get to see a lot of patients, you develop relationships, you learn the values, you learn sort of the other nurses and doctors and other people at the hospital. So it's a really nice way to kind of get a sense for a place. So spent the first couple of years working there and kind of getting settled in and getting to know the community. Kind of went back to my days at Jefferson, and people ask, well, why did you start Horseshoe Farm? And I remember as a third-year medical student, and I think each person has a little bit different experience as a medical student or going through it. I was just like perplexed. I go onto these units and you have all these good people. You have nurses and doctors and attendings and residents all working really, really hard and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And all of them are frustrated and upset. And all the patients are frustrated and upset. And I'm like, how can this be? We're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but everybody's angry at each other all the time. And I'm like, something seems off to me. And I couldn't really figure out what it was. And I think when I started doing my psychiatry residency, which was in community psychiatry, it really was like crystallized. You're dealing with people with homelessness and substance abuse problems and housing issues and relational problems. I was like, oh my goodness, these patients are exactly like the patients we were seeing at Jefferson, only the system is not well put together to actually meet their needs, which is I love sort of what, again, the MIPS is like saying, let's step out and actually look at what the patients actually need rather than what the system wants to provide, and saying, how do we actually get patients better, and looking at it in a more, I think, integrative way. What's interesting was when I got down there were no child psychiatrists. So I started getting approached by parents who said, hey, do you see kids? And I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be something I'm going to turn into a full-time child psychiatrist. But it's also interesting if you think about community health, you can define it in so many different ways, but you can almost not define, there's almost any definition that sort of talks about community health does talk about the investment in the well-being of children. That if you see a community where there is an investment in children, where there's broad and deep investment through schools and nonprofits and individuals investing in kids, it's a pretty clear sign that there is community health. And where that's not happening, you couldn't imagine a community having community health with that. So it was interesting as a psychiatrist, we started an after school program, worked with the local principal and sort of said, hey, we've got lots of kids who are struggling in lots of ways. Maybe we can provide some mentorship and academic enrichment. And that was really the beginning. We enlisted the help of the University of Alabama students who came down and volunteered in the program. But one of the things that I struggled with was I was really interested in providing care and pursuing a mental health or a community health model, but also really interested in teaching and education, and found that the University of Alabama students, their lives were really centered around their campus experience. They were coming down and doing the service, but I was like, there's no way for me to really convey to them, how do you sort of engage and invest in a community when you're spending 3/4 of your time on campus? So that's kind of where the idea of saying, hey, let's step it outside of their experience and make a 1-year fellowship where they actually come and live and sort of truly immerse themselves. And this is their priority, not a distraction, but it's a central part of what they do. So that was kind of the beginnings of it. So had to develop housing for students who were going to be coming down. My roommate at the time was one of the architecture students, and I said, I need housing. He goes, I can design housing. So we worked together and kind of designed, these are his initial sketches for the housing. And we started to build housing. I have no experience in building housing. It was an ordeal. This was in December before the first fellows were going to arrive. We were like, we're not going to have housing in time for them. And this is what they turned out to be. And we actually thought through the architecture. I was probably more extreme than I am now, but we didn't have heating or air conditioning in them. We didn't have internet access. The whole idea was that we saw that people were sort of holding up and withdrawing. And we wanted to force students out into relationship and into community. We would have been unsuccessful if we made it comfortable and people could kind of just retreat into their housing. We've since gotten air conditioning through pressure and other things like that. Times have changed, but those are our initial houses. And I think the really remarkable thing, the miracle was figuring out how to convince the first group of students to come down. I always imagine the conversation our first group of fellows had with their parents. What are you doing after you graduate? I'm going to Alabama. What are you going to be doing? I don't know. What does the nonprofit do? I don't know. But they somehow convinced their parents to come down, and they really were a remarkable group. So this was our first group. Sabrina actually graduated from UAB, is now a nurse practitioner in the correctional system. Katie actually went to Williams College, is from Brevard, North Carolina, and is now the assistant residency director in pediatrics at UNC Chapel Hill. And Jody came down from Auburn, Maine. She went to Amherst, and she is now the director of the nurse practitioner midwifery program at University of Tennessee. It's wonderful to see their sort of careers and taking on leadership roles through their lives. One of the things that I had seen through sort of my residency and through my work in the ACT program in the Village in LA, and you guys all know this, is how integral housing is to providing good health care. That if you don't have stable housing, all the rest of what we're doing is really, really, it's like, what are we really doing? And I don't think that's going to be one of the major problems as we're dealing with aging populations, we're dealing with people with complex mental illness, chronic, is like, you can't do healthcare unless you really start to think about housing. And so I wanted to sort of develop a program that actually did housing in a really strong way, but also taught students about the importance of the integration of housing and healthcare. I remember in the assertive community treatment model, I would get calls from the group homes that we would go out to, and they say, Mr. Jones needs his medicines adjusted. And I said, why? He goes, well, he's agitated. And I'm like, oh, why is he agitated? I don't know, but he needs his meds adjusted. And I go out and see, say, Mr. Jones, what's going on? He goes, my roommate stole my cigarettes. And I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I don't know that medicines are going to really fix that. And we got to figure out, how do you do high quality housing with sort of the support services, with sort of integrated psychiatry and medical care is really what's necessary to really provide for the needs of most of these patients. So I purchased this house, we painted it, put a new roof on it, again, got in more deeper into construction and architecture, never thought I would be. And we started to get women who came to the housing program. We've worked with probably about 70 or 80 women over the years. Some stay long-term, some use it as a transition until they can get stabilized and get back in with their family or move to their own apartments. And it's just also a wonderful opportunity for the fellows to build relationships. It's like so often you're working, they're going to be medical students, and then third year medical school, they're in the ER and they see a 72-year-old woman with mental health, and they're like, don't have any idea what their life is like and just get dismissed, versus having a personal relationship, I think changes everything. But one of the things that we saw was not only in the housing program, but how many people in the community needed extra relational support. It's just, there's not enough manpower, there's not enough time to give each person the relational support. And I think of this as the kind of our signature program is the Health Partners program. So each of our fellows is assigned between 7 and 10 people with mental illness, chronic medical issues, psychosocial challenges, and they go and do home visits, attend their doctor's appointments with them. You guys all know the sort of patient who shows up with their Walmart bag with 28 medicines. You have no idea what's actually going on. You write a prescription or you tell them to get a lab. You have no idea what's actually happening. They come, it's almost like, I think of if I have a 72-year-old woman, let's say she has mild or moderate dementia, and she comes by herself. I'm like, this is a wasted visit. I don't know what's really going on. I don't know whether she's gonna be able to follow up. I don't know if I'm doing more harm than good. I don't know the context of things. But imagine the 72-year-old woman who comes with a neighbor who checks in on her once or twice a week and is actually totally different interaction. So the fellows act as non-professional, non-psychiatric, layperson, helpful, caring neighbors. And that's the whole model. So the other thing that I think about, if I say see 15 patients in a day, and people struggling with trauma, abuse, turmoil, transportation, financial, all kinds of troubles, and I'll ask them, who in your life do you have you can turn to that you can talk with? And probably 3/4 will say nobody. That people are either going to use what I say against me, or don't trust people, or don't. What's the first instinct of anybody in this room when you're going through a hard time? Is you look for a friend or a family member to talk to, and to have to go through a heavier burden than any of us can probably imagine, and have to do that in isolation and just kind of internalize all of this struggle. Talk about setting people up first, and to have somebody who's there consistently, you can trust, who's not going to use the information against you, to talk with, that sort of social or relational part. I think we, for whatever reason, we've hugely underemphasized or underappreciated that value in improving health and quality of life. And for the fellows, again, to learn the relational and the sort of communicative and sort of emotional aspects of healthcare, I think hopefully sets them up for a success in their entire careers. The other thing we saw with the housing program was, man, it's not right to just have people sitting in houses, that we need places for people to go. People need fellowship, they need camaraderie, they need a structure to their day. And not only the ladies in our housing program, but lots of people, seniors, other people sitting alone at home all day smoking or watching television is not a setup for physical or mental health. So we set up community centers downtown. Fellows go and pick people up, bring them in, they'll have dominoes, they'll have games, they'll have walking club, exercise groups, cooking classes, other things, and the fellows all run those programs. And then those are really the 4 programs. But one of the things, if you think about community health, is this idea of social infrastructure. A lot of people have been talking about we're having a hard time in this sort of more fraying social fabric, a way in which we connect one another, the way we see one another, are sort of attributing sort of bad motives and seeing the other person as the enemy. And it's interesting when you're dealing with that is, first of all, how do you repair that? Robert Putnam is a sort of person who wrote Bowling Alone about 25 years ago. Hugely influential book, but everything he talked about social isolation and the disintegration of social fabric of people getting together and doing things together, doing grand rounds versus by Zoom versus doing it in person, all of these things, that's the substructure that without trust and sort of relational support, the education system doesn't work as well, the healthcare system, that's kind of the foundational piece. So the question is, if that is the foundational piece, what can you do to improve or strengthen that? And are we going to debate politics to strengthen that? No, that's not going to go anywhere. There's something fundamental about helping elderly people or children that cuts across that. If I told you there was this community where there was these really talented 20-year-olds who were going out and visiting with elderly people and visiting with children and supporting them, you would just instinctively know that that's a community I would want to be a part of. It feels very different, even different than saying, hey, we have a great healthcare system or we have a great school. There's something deeper that's going on. And I think that basic not only helps the individuals, but helps as a path to strengthen and reinforce, or a path towards strengthening the social fabric that cuts across political lines, religious lines, other things like that. I think the second level is this idea of community infrastructure and institutional infrastructure. And so I work at a hospital, and each of our organizations, we're so busy that we tend to have so many things to do. We look internally that it's really hard to build bridges and connections across institutions. But again, if you look at a community and you said, oh my gosh, the hospital is really well connected to the local high school, or the sort of Parks and Rec is really closely connected to the healthcare system. Like, wow, that's the kind of community I'd want to do. So the fellows are actually actively involved in all these different institutions and then act as the bridge for people to sort of move about, and also partnerships or sort of arrange ways that the institutions can work together. So our high school is working really closely with our hospital system in ways because of these bridges that we're forming. And I think that's a really important part of that we're not appreciating about community health. I guess there's a lot of educational unlocks that we've kind of looked at. I think the first one is, how do you get young people who are not professionally trained to both contribute meaningfully to sort of the health and quality of life of people, not through clinical means, and how you get it in such a way that it's also educationally rich. And that's kind of the first kind of unlocked, is we've done that so that they're both learning something meaningfully and contributing to people's lives and to the community health. The second unlock, and I've just seen this so many times, is colleges and universities will send students out and say, you're going to go out for a month or 2 months or 3 months, go do this project. And it's just setting them up for failure, because you can't even develop the relationships. You don't understand anything. But I think young people don't get that. And I think it's really the responsibility of teachers to teach them. So what we have is Horseshoe Farm has a longitudinal presence in each community over many years, develop these relationships and the trust and sort of the collaboration. And then on top of that, the fellows can come in for 1 year chunks, right? And then they kind of get to know, and by the end of the year, they've really developed and they've leveraged the relationships Horseshoe Farm's developed over a long period. And then we're able to plug in nursing students or undergrad students who can come for a shorter period, who work with the fellows, who extend the trust and relationship. It seems like a subtle point, but it's just a thing that I've just seen so often that people aren't really looking at. So those are, I guess, two of the kind of educational unlocks. We've worked with now since 2009, about 230 fellows who are sort of now spread out all over the country, taking leadership roles in their communities. We now work with nursing students, medical students, residents, fellows, undergrads who come in as interns, and those two structures allow for them to sort of meaningfully come in and say, instead of go do a project, you're plugging into something that's already established, and you can learn from one another. And now I think this last a couple years ago, I got a call from a couple of my friends, and they said, oh, my daughter or my son's a junior in high school. They're thinking about healthcare. Can they come down here? And I was like, well, I'm not sure that they're going to be mature enough, and ended up sending them down, and they thrived. Interesting. I think if you look at, let's say, an 8-year-old now, who's going to be a freshman in high school in about 5 years or 6, 7 years, and you say to that person in 5 years that you're going to sit in a classroom from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. in these 30-person classes, they're going to look at you like you're from Mars. It's not going to work. That fundamentally, I think the whole education system from high school through college, and I think medical schools ahead, is going to shift from classroom work to experiential, sort of, that you have to develop structures for them. But for kids, like for high school kids, if you don't have a mom or a dad who's a nurse or a doctor and you're interested in healthcare, you go over to the local hospital, they're going to be like, nothing for you to do. But if we can actually develop, say, hey, come to our community center programs, go with our fellows out to a health partners visit, go volunteer and work with people we're working with in the nursing home, or cook with the ladies in the housing program. What a great thing for them. One of the things we're hearing broadly, and you guys are probably seeing, is kids at all ages, and this is including in nursing school and medical school, are coming, and I hear this from the admissions officers, is they're having a hard time with communication, looking people in the eye, emotionally understanding. And so it's really the educational system that's going to have to teach those things. We can complain about those things being missing, or you can actually teach people and give people experience with that. So the fellows get to be famous. They get their bios published in the local newspaper, so everybody knows about them. Everybody looks forward to seeing them year to year. We have our site in Greensboro. And then about 7 years ago, we were growing, and we decided to see if we could start it in a different town in Alabama, about 20 miles away. So we started a second site in Perry County. So that's been going since 2018. And then 2020, a friend of Project Horseshoe Farm, who's actually from California, said, John, all right, you've made this work in 2 rural towns in Alabama. If you really want to test this robustness, let's see if it can work in a culturally different sort of urban place. So we decided to launch one in Pomona, California in 2020. And that has a more robust sort of nonprofit and sort of government structure, but it's worked extremely well in all 3 sites. So it really says that there's something about this that is, obviously you adapt to the sort of culture and other things, but there is something universal about this idea of volunteering to help elderly people, to help people with mental illness, to help children, and to support local institutions that really does translate well. And then the last thing we're working on is trying to come out from underneath to really influence our healthcare system. I think much in the way sort of strategically, it's like you can't change a whole healthcare system, but you start to integrate these ideas and then spread it out. Dr. Bonds is actually a family medicine doctor who came down as a fellow about 9-10 years ago. She was from Vermont, went to Williams, came down, fell in love with the local guy, went back to medical school in the University of Vermont, decided she wanted to come back down to Greensboro, did a residency at University of Alabama, and is now my boss, the chief of medical staff at the hospital. So she kind of tells me, scolds me when I don't finish my medical records on time. But I mean, she's really, I think, trying to sort of work with us. A couple of things we're doing, working obviously with the health partners. We do something called Primary Care Plus, where we got a grant from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama to protect hour-long visits 1 morning a week, where she can call UAB specialists instead of trying to have disintegrated care, is actually integrating care with mental health, specialty care, all through a relationship, and trying to pull all these pieces together, which I know you guys are doing as well. And I think that's the challenge. So I'll end here. When I talk with the fellows, I think a lot of times we get so caught in the process of what we're doing, or this is medicine. And I try to put some historical or context for them and say, if you ask that question, what we're going to keep doing is repeating and sort of training you in systems that people are acknowledging aren't functioning. And then you're going to repeat this cycle over and over. And I say, don't ask what medicine is. Ask what's valuable. Say, what is it that I need to learn through my medical training and through whatever other things to contribute to the health and well-being of patients and to help strengthen my community. And if you do that, hopefully that will create a road to a different sort of health world. I think that we're entering in a period of a lot of change and uncertainty, especially with technology and AI. And if you look at how much different medicine was than it was 50 years ago or 120 years ago at the Industrial Revolution, it is going to be, I think, a period of turmoil, but when there's turmoil, there's opportunity. Sometimes things need to be shaken up in order for us to start to think differently. And I think it is a generational challenge for the next generation of physicians to hopefully create a system that focuses much more on relationships and community. So I'll end there. Thank you. and take any questions that y'all have.
Oh yeah. No, I think we're going to have those. I will tell you this whole row, like all we said when you ended was wow. So I'm sure we're not alone in that.
Thank you. An immensely inspiring and wonderful talk. Thank you for that. If you will pardon me, I want to ask use the bad M word. How did you get I call it the M word. When you start out on this, where do you find the funds and the money to run programs like this?
So I like to joke, for the first 10 years of Horseshoe Farm, the board generously gave me 100% raise every year, and I was still at $0. So that was, the fellows, and a lot of people ask, I think what I've learned about starting things is that if you wait for the building or the funding, it's never, if somebody comes to me and says, I've got a great idea, and if only I can get funding, or if only I can get a building, I'm like, politely say, you're looking at it the wrong way. I think you have to start out and figure out what is it you can do for almost no budget. So we started an after school program. I would go to the grocery store and spend $20, $30 and buy string cheese and juice boxes and use the school spaces. And when we first approached donors, they were like, well, very nice idea, come back to us. And then after a year or two, we'd go back and then they'd give us a $1,000 grant. Say, well, you've done good for the first two, you've gotten something started. And then we built out a little bit further, and then they would give $5,000 grants. And slowly over time, different foundations in Alabama have gotten interested. Blue Cross and Blue Shield has gotten interested. Actually, parents of the fellows have gotten very interested and seen sort of the impact. So we're really all, probably that's a big part of my job, but all sort of privately funded through philanthropies and individuals.
I'll ask a related question and then I'll look to the room as well, but related to funding and especially with insurance partnership, I'm curious what sort of health and well-being outcomes your program is tracking and how they sort of interpret those findings to decide, is this valuable?
So for me, I'm not a researcher. So and when you run something like this, it is all consuming, and it's like, feels like we've had different organizations down. So Robert Wood Johnson Foundation came down and did a study in 2019, looking at all the counties in Appalachian, Alabama, Appalachian region from West Virginia down to Alabama. And actually, Hale County was the only bright spot county in terms of health outcomes. And sort of, I think they looked at 19 chronic health measures. Indirect, can't say that we directly were the cause of that. I think one other thing that was kind of an interesting outcome during COVID, they looked at the vaccination rates of all the counties in Alabama. And you would think Hale County, rural Alabama, pretty low. We were the third highest vaccination rate in the entire state. We actually beat the county, Jefferson County, which is Birmingham. And people were like, what the heck is that all about? And the fellows set up sort of the vaccination. They had relationships in this community that tied to the community and trust, that people were like, oh, okay, this is what we do. So those are some small measures, but that is something that we want to put a greater emphasis on, is looking at the sort of economic and also the sort of other outcomes as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Looking at my colleagues here in the room, who else has a question? Dr. Wood? I thought you might, but you also made eye contact, which is your first mistake.
I'm so sorry. I should have sat in the back row and just disappeared. This is amazing. I've been here a year, so I love this sort of stuff. I think as new faculty, fresh out of training, one thing that I think about with this sort of stuff is how did you, as a younger professional, kind of protect yourself from some of the trappings that might incentivize people to, let's say, take a more conservative job. I think my favorite musicians would say selling out. But you know, with medical debt being so huge, with PSLF being a big question mark. What sort of choices did you make as kind of an early professional to give yourself that freedom to be so self-sacrificing and kind of follow the mission?
I think it's hugely important. Really good question. I mean, the pragmatics of it. I was very fortunate that my grandmother and my uncle left money to help me to graduate with limited debt from medical school. So I think that was a huge thing. I talk to the fellows all the time. If you can go to your state school, if you can get a scholarship, medical school, go to the place that is going to minimize your debt. I don't think young people really recognize what $200,000-$300,000 in debt really means. I think the second thing is cost of living is that was a huge advantage. So part of the reason I couldn't see it happening in Southern California is that where housing is like starts at 800-900, that's the cheapest housing you're going to find. I joke with my friends in California. I said I bought my first house for $0.095 million. Like, what does that even mean? So it's just a different scale of sort of, so I don't have to make as much money, and was able to sort of say, hey, I need enough money to be able to get by and survive. But I think it's a really important question that we have to ask broadly about what are we setting people up for? And if we do have idealistic young people who want to pursue it, are we chopping their legs out from under them before they even get started? I think it's really, really important sort of medical education sort of question. I think dead on.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Whitting.
Thank you, Jen. This is great. I was wondering a little bit, you mentioned that when people come in for a month that, that's not a really great way to build trust with the community. Even a year, I've found there's a lot of turnover for folks who have been in the community for a long time. So how do you mitigate that? I know some of it is obviously building trust over time with this organization, but.
It's fascinating. I think the previous fellows, like the first classes are the toughest, but weirdly, as long as the fellows do a good job, they're almost handing off that trust to the new group of fellows. They're like, oh, you're a fellow. I liked these people. So they're starting with a little bit of a runway. So I think even a year, if you're starting out, but because I think it's that longitudinal experience. And I would say that, let's say for a health partner, when they transition from the new or the old fellows to the new fellows, I tell the fellows, you're still going to have to work at it 3-4 months before you're going to, so your first 3 months is still, even though they know your horseshoe farm, you're going to still have to build that trust, and you're going to have to work at it, which is a great experience for them to learn about. But that's, I think most of the fellows would say, yeah, they really feel like fairly quickly, 3, 4, 5 months, feel like, hey, I'm part of the community. But that's been our experience. But I think your point is a really good one.
Since I still have the mic. One other question. Great points about children and the elderly. What about the rest of us?
Tell me specifically.
So we take care of a lot of patients who are in that mid-range, and there's less empathy, it seems, in society for that group of people. And how do we? So is it only through building through these? No. How do you kind of get people to get their heads around? There's a lot of sort of mistrust in society, especially among people who use substances, for example.
I mean, I think I almost think of it this way, is that if you look at, if I were sort of a student and I said, all right, I have a keychain and you have all these keys on it, and you're going to learn about all these keys of ways that you can sort of help patients, whether it's a pharmacologic intervention, a laboratory procedure, whatever it is. And then there's this one keychain that has one big key on it. And this key works for every single patient. Would you want to learn about that one key? Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I've never seen a case where, again, patient has to be willing or person has to be willing, where a healthy, caring relationship did not have a net positive for a patient's health, mental health, and physical health. And that's the one key. And it works for elderly people, it works for middle-aged people, it works for young people. And I think weirdly, again, we're joking, like in this sort of zombie world where we're not connecting with one another, but particularly you guys you grew up without smartphones. You look at younger people, they're just weirdly, and I've seen it in the fellows, they're different over the last 5 or 6 years. We're having to sort of teach, how do you connect? How do you communicate? How do you do those things? But that's the one key that that's foundational to everything else sort of being built around. And I think if we focus our energies, our education system on that to a greater degree, our communities, healthcare system around that, I think we're all going to be better off. Is it going to be perfect? No, but is it a step? I think, yeah.
Thanks so much for this presentation. I really appreciate learning about the program and your path to kind of your own reflections on where you were and where you wanted to be and then how you got there. I'm curious about, in terms of the educational piece, obviously the experiential part is really where it's all at, but I'm wondering as well, as you talk about some of these sort of skills and ways of being that learners right now maybe are needing to develop further, sort of what that looks like and what whether there's supervision, precepting, and feedback, and all of that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. If you look, there are two different educational models. One is sort of start with the abstract and then try to find the particular or the concrete. I think the experiential learning is it starts with the experience and then you reflect outward, but there's got to be a reflective, for it really to take hold, it's got to be a reflective component. So we have site directors who do regular teaching, reflection one-on-one. We have a curriculum that teaches a lot of the things that you guys learned and we learned in psychiatry about motivational interviewing, sort of 4 levels of communication. So really taking the particular and letting them reflect on that and struggle and sort of wrestle with that and then go out and see the contextual piece. But I think that's the best learning is sort of the putting the two together.
Just looking toward the back, Dr. Lee.
It's wonderful to find out you're also from Jefferson Medical College because I also graduated in 1997. So I was just curious, like, are you still practicing as a psychiatrist, and how do you combine that, your clinical practice, to this particular line of work that seems to be just growing like leaps,
Yeah, it's always a tough balance because as we've grown, sort of running an organization becomes more difficult, the fundraising, the sort of connections, the relations, all of that. I love practice. I love my patients. I love practicing. And I also think that it helps, it's a different part of my brain. I love the sort of management and leadership part and the teaching part. But I think if I lost that piece of connection to patients, I really feel like I'd lose sort of some sense. So I see patients outpatient Mondays and Thursdays. I see go over to the nursing home every other Tuesday. But it is one of the challenges is how to balance it. It is really neat. So a lot of our health partners come from my practice. I'm like, okay, clearly I'm not going to be able to fix what's going on in 15 minutes. Let's step back. Let's introduce you to one of the fellows and let's sort of look at it in a different mindset. So I think the two do overlap in that way. One of my favorite, you guys all know who Atul Gawande is. It's an article I share with the fellows. I think it always reminds me is he says that whether it's psychiatry, primary care, family medicine, he says, oftentimes you come in and you got 82 different problems with the patient. And so either you get overwhelmed or sort of in medical, so they teach you pick one problem or whatever it is. Like those are the strategies. And he said, no, that's not the right way to look at it. You should look at primary care as a protracted surgery over 12 months and say you have a 12-month procedure. And if you in surgery just go in and you don't sterilize the site or do whatever the prep work, and you skip to the third step, you're going to mess up the surgery. You look at management of patients who are the patients and look at it, hey, it sets the provider up for success because you're like straightforward. You've got a lot of things going on. We're not going to be able to fix this all at once, but are you willing to work with me over the next 6 to 12 months? Suddenly the entire interaction changes versus, hey, the effector's not working. I want to switch to this because it's just a totally different way of looking at our approach to care. And I think that it does tie together with, all right, you do this within the clinical setting and then you develop the sort of structures and the relationships within the community. But that is the challenge, I think, for the entire healthcare system is working with limited funding and limited support. How do you sort of tie these things together to make a difference for patients? But
Sorry, one more question. I'm sorry, my brain is running a mile a million with so many different things that I would love to learn from you. One question I had is, especially when you talk about fellows and then being there for about a year, the relationship building is so important. But at the end of the year, do any of them still continue to maintain that relationship in any way, shape, or form? Is that encouraged, discouraged in any way? And also, when within the framework of that 1 year, they may be doing visits, but sometimes people, when they build relationships, may ask more of you than is feasible. Is there, what is the structure for protecting them?
totally.
And if there are things that they're not used, especially for high schoolers, if they're dealing with or witnessing things that are really difficult.
Yep. I think 2 wonderful questions. Yes, the fellows, the health partners, the individuals they work with, call them. I actually hear more sometimes about, oh my gosh, so-and-so is in third year of medical school and he or she's on this rotation when they come in to see me. So it is wonderful that these are relationships, and they'll send birthday cards. I mean, just wonderful that it really is deeply something that I think imprints on the fellows' hearts. And it's a really interesting time when you're 22. That really does impact you in sort of your developmental stage and your educational stage. So yes, I think that's a natural, and the types of people we're selecting is for fellows have that inclination. I think the health partners will say this meaningful person in my life. In terms of the boundaries, hugely important. We try to sort of say, hey, select people who are appropriate for each level of training, and sort of with those, we teach about boundaries very, very strongly. And I think the framing of it is this idea of what is it that you are? And people are like, are you a social worker? No, you're not. Are you a caseworker? No. Are you a community health worker? No. Are you a nurse? We're like, then what the heck are you? And we say, you're a helpful, caring neighbor. And if you look at that, would a helpful, caring neighbor give a neighbor a ride to the doctor every once in a while? Yeah. Are they going to give them a ride to Birmingham 3 times a week? Probably not, right? Are they going to? So that kind of becomes our sort of North Star, is like, these are the boundaries. If somebody's calling the student saying, I'm in crisis or I'm about to have suicide, like, well, really, we'll take care of it right there, but then talk with both the health partner and the person, say, you're not a crisis worker, you're not a psychiatrist, you're not a psychologist. And if it continues, then we have to say, hey, maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe we need to get you with a social worker, or you need to get somebody, but we really do pay attention and teach and sort of monitor that very, very closely. Is really important.
One of the things that I'm so intrigued with, both in your presentation and in the questions that are being asked and in listening to your response, relates to your last slide where the graphic said, what is valuable? And what I expected to see, but really what I heard was, what are your values and what do you care about? That single key, I can't imagine anybody in this room who would say, no, I don't want that key. And that key is both always accessible and hard to hold on to. So Dr. Wood's comment or question, absolutely, I think sort of signals the tension around those things. But it's also incredibly inspiring that that key really is right there all the time. All the time. That the value proposition is always favorable, that it costs nothing to have it. And so the last 2 questions that are tucked in here, I think, are related to that. Including, what would it be like to bring something like this to Rochester? And, and don't say Zena would do it. And then the other is, do you have any plans to create a playbook on how others can replicate? So from my mind's eye, I'm thinking you have to start with the one key and everybody's got it. But these are 2 also very good questions.
I mean, so I did the MIP rounds with Marcia this morning, and all I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, would that fit? And I'm sure there's senior centers and sort of housing programs and nursing homes that in Pomona, we didn't know how it was going to go because we'd done in Alabama. And so I went out there and I said, all right, are they going to be willing to have us? There's this group from Alabama. And I went to the school system. We said, we're going to have these vetted, really strong volunteers who are going to be with you and work with your students for a year. And the answer was, what's the catch? And I go, no catch. And then we went to the nursing home, and there's an activities director who's looking at 130 patients trying to give individual, and it's like overwhelmed and stressed out. We go, we're going to bring students and they're going to work with and do activities, and they're going to do visits one-on-one with your nursing home residents who never get and they're like, she's like, what's the catch? And I go, no catch. And then we went to the community centers, and they were like, they wouldn't let us go. They were like, please stay. So I think it really does. And the beautiful part about Rochester is you've already got this strength that's already there in these structures. I think any structures that are already there, it actually amplifies those existing things. So it's actually better when you have those things. And there's so many good things going on here that I think it would totally fit. And again, what a natural fit for University of Rochester with the biopsychosocial model to say, what does that look like from an educational standpoint, a community standpoint? I think it'll strengthen the undergrad, it'll strengthen your medical school, interdisciplinary, social work students, nursing students, medical students, all working together towards the one key, which is the universal. In terms of the playbook, my friend who helped us to set up the Pomona site said, John, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous. You need to do a big book. And I'm like, nobody's going to read through 500-page thing. I was like, it's just too complicated. And then when AI started to come out, I was like, ooh, that changes things. So one of my friends is starting a psychiatry residency up in Tuscaloosa. And I told her, I said, Dr. Giggy, how good would it have been when you started to think about this 4 years ago if you had an AI coach, companion, co-thinker to walk you through setting up the residency? And she goes, oh my gosh, that would have been, we're not as complex as a residency, but if we can enter, and that's what we're in the process of doing, is entering all this information. What does a site director do? How do you set up the boundaries? What does the teaching look like? What are all these pieces, small things that we've learned over the last 15 years, putting it in this thing and you can then say, how do you start a program? What's the process of starting a program? And then how do you sort of a playbook for maintaining it, but not that you have to read through a pamphlet, but you can get a coach and sort of prompts and other things. But that's exactly what we're thinking about.
So cool. Maybe not a big book, but a white paper.
That's right.
Well, on behalf of our department and our community, I know you're visiting a couple of sites over the course of your time here. I'm just so grateful. This has been so
Likewise.
cool.
Wonderful.
So thank you on behalf of all of us and have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.